Remember when I went to England last month with my mama? Well, I'm finally sitting down to prioritize all the tea adventures in England and bring them to you in this longer video. So get comfy and let's spill the tea. This trip wasn't about sightseeing in London. It was a countryside getaway visiting friends. You might have caught my daily What I Ate in England short videos while we were there. During our stay, we enjoyed 3 different afternoon tea experiences, and today I'm taking you along for the ride. I'll start with the fanciest one first, and then we'll move on to the one that kept things classic and simple. And make sure you stick around to the end because I've saved my absolute favorite for last. For our fancy tea, we were invited by our DEVON Cream Company hosts. Check out the factory video for more context. I'll put the link in the description. And we were in for a treat at the Royal Crescent. This building had the wow factor. The Royal Crescent is almost always listed among the top afternoon teas in Bath, with its gorgeous Georgian architecture, lush gardens, and refined decor. It's the kind of elegant tea experience that makes you feel truly special. There were around 13 tea options on the menu. We were told we could try as many teas as we wanted to, but I couldn't resist the chocolate brownie tea. And yes, even though I almost always go for Earl Grey, this one was too good to pass up. After the tea pours, our table of 4 was presented with 2 tiers of beautifully arranged treats. For the savories, we each got 4 finger sandwiches, coronation chicken, egg salad, ham and mustard, and smoked salmon. I swapped my salmon with my mom's ham. She loves salmon, I don't. And while the fillings were delicate and on the lighter side, everything was fresh and tasty. I did yearn for a zippy cheddar cheese on the ham sandwich. Next, we moved on to the scones, which surprisingly were on the top tier. Each guest received a scone, or scone if you prefer that pronunciation, and a bath bun. For those who haven't had one, it's a milk-based yeast dough with a signature lump of sugar baked inside and topped with crusted sugar bits. Each pair in our party shared generous helpings of jam and, the star of the show, proper clotted cream. Some of us, myself included, wanted butter for our bath bun, and they happily brought some over. Honestly, I'll never choose between butter and clotted cream. I like them both, and today I was living my best indulgent life here in England. Now, this scone, beautiful, light, fluffy, and utterly yummy. And the clotted cream? If we were in Canada, this amount would have been expected to cover all 4 scones, and then some. But here, this bowl was just for 2 of us. So generous and truly decadent. While the bath bun was super sweet with its sugar cube inside and sugar nibs on top, I loved it. Slathered in butter, this bun was made for me, so indulgent. That scone and bun tier with that glorious pail of clotted cream absolutely made my heart sing. This is why I came to England. There'll be no begging for proper clotted cream around here. The sweets had a Jane Austen theme, because she lived here, and Bath inspired much of her writing about the Regency era. We each received 4 sweets, and now, a few weeks later, none of them really stand out, though they were really pretty. I think the first one was a financier cake. The tart was some kind of fruit tart. The cream puff had a gooseberry jelly inside, if my memory serves, and the cake was multi-layered, probably raspberry. As you can tell, these didn't knock my Canadian socks off. But I like to think Jane Austen herself would have appreciated how light and fruity they were. I bet my loyal followers would have expected me to hunt down a decadent chocolate treat here, but maybe chocolate everywhere isn't a thing in the UK. And the chocolate brownie tea swooped in like a hero. The takeaway box shaped like a purse was neat, and, quote, "too delicious to leave behind," they say, ha 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 ha. The menu states that this afternoon tea experience costs £49 per person, approximately 91 Canadian and 65 US. Honestly, I have no idea how this stacks up against other venues of this caliber in the UK, so I'll refrain from judging. The hits for me? The venue. Absolutely stunning. The Royal Crescent made me feel like I was out for a promenade, straight from a Bridgerton scene. Swoon! The company was delightful. I loved having afternoon tea with proper British tea ladies. And of course, the scone, bath bun, and that glorious bucket of clotted cream were major highlights. Basically, heaven in a tier. The misses, from my admittedly Canadian perspective, The finger sandwiches were too lightly filled, the sweets were fluffy rather than show-stopping, and the service had a cheeky edge that wasn't really my vibe in this venue, with this group of proper ladies. I'll leave it at that. Overall, I really enjoyed this afternoon tea as my fancy tea experience. Would you attend tea at Royal Crescent? Up next, the one that wasn't quite as fancy but still had its charm. From the grandeur of Bath and the Royal Crescent, we swapped Bridgerton elegance and Jane Austen romance for a more low-key, but still quite charming afternoon tea. This time we were at Donnington Manor Hotel in Sevenoaks, joined by my mum and her dear friend Robin. The hotel itself is in Kent and dates back to the 15th century. With its Tudor-style exterior and lovely gardens, I was immediately taken by the outside of this place. Inside, the afternoon tea was served in a dining room that felt more like pub than parlor, but this gorgeous window brought just the right amount of charm to the scene. Upon arrival, we were seated and presented with their tea chest, filled with, tea bags. For our first pot, I popped in 2 bags of Tetley Earl Grey into the teapot and poured a cuppa for Mum and me. When it came time for a second pot, I switched to the Twinings Earl Grey. Now, since I only did 3 afternoon teas during this trip, I can't say for sure if this is standard practice in England, but making your own teapots from tea bags isn't exactly my idea of an elevated afternoon tea experience. Back home, that would be pretty unusual. But maybe here it's more common? Our 3-tier stand arrived with our 3 servings. Each guest received 4 finger sandwiches, smoked salmon, cucumber, egg salad, and tomato with ham, while our fancy tea had meager fillings. At the other end of the spectrum, I found these to be kinda chunky and clunky. They may not have been dainty, but they were freshly made, so points for that. At Donnington Manor, each guest received 2 scones, 1 plain and 1 raisin. On the table sat a plate of mini Bon Maman raspberry and strawberry jams, and we were given a massive pot of glorious clotted cream. I could have happily swan-dived into that creamy pool. Such a generous portion, pure heaven. I scooped the biggest glob onto my plate to load up a scone, and Mum did the same. I topped half a scone using the Devonshire method, cream first, jam on top, and the other half the Cornish way, jam first, cream on top. Both were equally delicious, trust me. These scones actually reminded me of the Waitrose ones I found at the store earlier in the trip, but when I asked the chef, he insisted that he made them. All right then, on to the sweet bites. We each received 4 items, a pistachio cake, a carrot cake, a raspberry cake, and 2 macarons. The cakes were pretty good. The pistachio one was my favorite, but then the macarons, I was distraught to see them. I'd hoped they wouldn't follow me to England, but alas, these silly little cookies have made themselves at home here too. This afternoon tea cost £25 per person, about 47 Canadian or 44 US, about half the price of the Royal Crescent fancy tea. Once again, I can't really judge prices on this side of the pond. I just don't have enough experience here yet to know the going rate at different types of venues. It is what it is. The hits for me, first, talking to the chef. Shout out to Amro, who proudly wanted a photo with his creation. He genuinely cared about our experience and appreciated our feedback. I also loved that gorgeous window. It made for some really pretty afternoon tea photos. For the tastiest bite, that award goes to the pistachio cake. So good. And of course, the generous helping of clotted cream was my #1 hit. No surprise there. The misses? Which, yes, we shared directly with the chef, the sandwich fillings, but for the opposite reason of the fancy tea, a finer chop on the cucumbers and tomatoes would have gone a long way. And according to my mum, less salmon, please. I guess this was too much, too rich for her liking. And for me, having to make my own teapot was a bit of a letdown. Maybe that's more common here in England, but it's not my favorite way to do afternoon tea. Would you come for tea in this Tudor-style manner? All right, we've covered fancy and mid-tier. Now it's time for the grand finale, my favorite afternoon tea of the trip. This spot has been on my bucket list for years, and spoiler alert, it delivered. Drum roll, please. We went to the Bridge Tea Rooms in Bradford-on-Avon. The Bridge Tea Rooms are housed in a former blacksmith's cottage, dating back to 1502. Originally built as a single-story cottage, a second level was added in 1675, and it became a tea room in 1989. There's even a plaque outside marking its historical significance. Sitting across from it is a large bridge, where I assume it gets its name. Meet you at the bridge for a cup of tea. What I adore is how the building isn't even square. It looks like it's slowly tipping over. Once inside, you can feel the real tilt of the building. But honestly, if you were built in the 1500s, you'd be a little wobbly too. The exterior is jaw-droppingly unique, and the interior did not disappoint. Dark, cozy colors, homey trinkets, and hefty wooden beams. I absolutely loved being here. We were seated in the corner of the second floor by the window. I can't even describe how much I loved this spot. There are just no words. Their menu features several types of tiered afternoon teas, plus lunch options, and we went for 2 Empire High teas, which included all 3 courses, the format I'm most familiar with. They offered over 30 teas, all served loose leaf. Love to see that. I chose a tea called Russian Caravan because of the multi notes, but no, it wasn't for me. Honestly, why do I ever veer away from trusty Earl Grey? I always think I could be adventurous, and then instant regret. Luckily, Mom went with Earl Grey and generously shared hers, so it all worked out in the end. For savories, we had smoked salmon, egg salad, cucumber, chicken salad, and chutney with cheddar. All were finger sandwiches, freshly made, and with the perfect amount of filling. Not too much and not too little. Goldilocks was happy. Mom and I swapped my salmon for her cucumber Sammy. These sandwiches all tasted great. We especially noticed and loved the layer of butter on the egg and chicken sandwiches, something we don't typically do back home in Ontario, Canada. But added butter is always a great idea. Our top pick, the cheddar and chutney. Holy, it was outrageously tasty. I asked the server what chutney they used, and he simply said it's a tomato chutney. Mysterious, cryptic, like a family secret recipe I'll never get my hands on. But whatever, it was delicious. On to the showstopper, the scones. Once again, they made their grand entrance on the top tier. We each got 1 large scone accompanied by another overflowing bowl of proper clotted cream and jam. We think it was strawberry and fig. Whatever it was perfect. I dressed 1 half with jam on the top and the other half with cream on the top, just to keep the internet at peace. Personally, I prefer jam on top. It spreads easier and honestly, it's just prettier. I said what I said, but both ways tasted smashing. Truly, there are no words for how delicious this was and how happy it made your resident tea queen. For the sweet course, we each received a sponge cake, a meringue, a cheesecake, a tart, and a chocolate brownie. A generous count of goodies. The cheesecake was Biscoff, complete with a caramel layer between the crust and the cheesecake. The vanilla sponge had a subtle lemon flavor, light, airy, and just lovely. The tart was crisp and flaky, topped with a stiff whipped cream. Could there have been clotted cream mixed in there? We both thought so. Inside, we suspected fig jam. Not entirely sure, but delicious regardless. The meringue had a lovely chew and a bright berry flavor, and the chocolate brownie had a graham crust base with a subtle chocolatey finish. Overall, the varieties of shapes, flavors, colors, and textures on this tier seriously impressed me. It felt like the perfect sweet crescendo to an already fantastic afternoon tea. Honestly, I don't think it could have been any better if I dreamt it up myself. This afternoon tea cost £36 per person, about 68 Canadian or 49 American, landing neatly between the 2 other teas we experienced in England. You won't be surprised to hear that I absolutely loved it. Not only did it tick a major box on my afternoon tea bucket list, but the venue exceeded my expectations. So classic, so unique, and so full of character. And to have the food live up to, or even surpass the setting, that was truly the icing on the cake of this tea. 10 out of 10, though here if you're ever in the county of Wiltshire. And there you have it, 3 very different afternoon tea experiences across England. From the fancy grandeur of Bath to the more casual cozy vibes in Sevenoaks, and finally, the storybook charm of Bradford-on-Avon. Each one had its own hits, hello buckets of clotted cream, and Mrs. I'm looking at you, DIY teapots. But together they painted a delicious picture of how varied afternoon tea can be in the UK. Whether you're after elegance, value, or pure atmosphere, there's truly a tea for every taste. And I loved getting to experience a tiny bit of it all. So happy I got to share it with you too, tea friends. Thanks for joining me on the jaunt across the pond for afternoon tea.